All right. Good afternoon, good day, good morning, good evening, everybody who is watching. And I already saw some uh, uh, places where you're all coming from, Czechia, even Sydney. So we are global, so to speak. There is some echo, so that's what we want to solve. That's interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Menno. Is that still? Oh, maybe the echo is coming from where in the world you are. So please let me know if there's an echo that continues. Let me know. So my name is Guido Morst. Welcome to this webinar, which is all about the future of the classroom. And we're going to see how virtual reality plays a part in that. Of course, thank you for watching. Thank you for joining. Happy to see you here. And we also have a very special guest who I will ask to join later on in this webinar to talk more about how he is using virtual reality in his context. I won't say classroom, but we'll get to that. All right, so my name is Guido Helmorst. I'm one of the co-founders of Warp VR. And for the past 6 years, I've been helping mid and large size companies to tackle their challenge of situational training and on the job training. And before that, I spent almost 10 years at KLM, where I saw hands on that challenge of training people while the business must go on. And that's where I came across virtual reality. And we're now applying that to tackle those challenges. 40 plus mid-sized companies are using our technology to train their employees. And it's very broad, right? From onboarding to safety training to soft skills, and various industries, from retail to banking to oil and energy, across the globe, because essentially it's about bringing situations to those trainees. And we've, in the past years, we've trained over 25,000 people playing those immersive story-based scenarios on subjects like customer service, but also safety and onboarding, like I said, but even a bank robbery. So very broad applications. And interestingly, a lot of those trainees spend on average around 9 minutes in a scenario. And 9 minutes means full focus, full dedication, interacting with the real life scenario in that sense. So coming out of that, they're better trained professionals for it. And that means real results. And of course, we've seen various research studies who show that people are more confident, that they're more connected, more empathetic with the situation, but also that it reduces time to train. So all in all, thank you for joining. Short introduction. And today, as discussed, we're going to talk about the future of classroom training. And I wanted to start with a post, basically, which came out recently, which was titled "Experiential Learning in VR Will Reshape the Future of Education." And I just wanted to take two sentences, paragraphs out of this study, because I think it's interesting to set the stage, also from these writers' perspectives. So let me quote. First quote: although these solutions were crucial, and they are referring to kind of the e-learning and traditional ways of learning, they mostly focused on transferring knowledge, not the practical and in-person experience students and trainees need to grasp concepts. After all, while some learn through theory, others learn through practice. So that's quote one. The other one says it allows students to immerse themselves in an interactive experience where they can visualize their actions, outcomes firsthand. And I think that was a very powerful sentence. I wish I would, I had written it myself. But it's all about providing those students the experience of learning by doing, of falling and standing up again, because we're all human, and that's the way we learn. And this brings us a step closer to actually doing that in also a classroom setting. So let's explore that a little bit more. And the basic concept I want to pose here is that when a learner using a VR headset with an immersive scenario in a classroom, it enables them to walk out at the end of the day better prepared and more confident for real life situations. And that's the core I want to discuss with you. And this goes, of course, for education, even K-12. But today we're going to focus more on corporate education, where, of course, and I recently read, even about 70% of today's corporate training is still in a classroom setting. The first time I experienced the power of VR in a classroom was a while back. It was in 2019, and we, together with one of our customers, were invited into a classroom where they used the VR experience, and as you see, also with the headsets. So this was an elderly care facility. They were introducing a new way of working, and they wanted to add to their daily program of one day, one training day. They wanted to add the element of actually using it in practice. And that's where they found the application of VR training to be useful. So they created the scenario, and we were invited at one of those training days. So this was a group about 15 people, where the day was kind of structured in a way. So in the morning there was a theory part, also with interacting with the tablet, because the new way of working also how do you say that? Encompasses or used an app for to help them in their workflow. So that was the morning program, and then after lunch it was time for VR. And that's the part, of course, where we were very excited but also anxious, because it was the first time that we would see it kind of hands-on being used. And of course there was some, well, let's say not struggle, but this was, for a lot of the participants, it was the first time that they actually had in their hands a headset. So, but the interesting part, or a couple of parts that were very interesting to see. First, some struggle that's with headset, but as soon as they put it on, they were in that world and not in that in kind of the real world. And they started interacting. They started talking, and you had to make sure that they didn't start walking. And they were very interactive and engaged with the content that was on the headset. And to give you a short, brief feel for what the situation and experience looks like, or looked like, I will show you a brief video of that. Here we go. And I will narrate it because you won't hear the sound. It's also in Dutch. But here you see you are the first person and you have to interact with this Mr. Jansen to help him get up, help him to dress the right way. And the question is, how do you do it? And how do you interact with this person? And how do you deal later on in the experience also with the family members who also have an opinion? Um, and let me stop it here. Um, so that was just to give you a feel of that experience. But back to what happened in the classroom, because after lunch, they were experiencing it. And then once they experienced it, they gathered around and the trainers talked about, what did you experience? How did it make you feel? What was happening? How would you use the app? How would you use the information? What is the impact of the new way of working? And what we saw, and that was, well, the first time, and it was really kind of a mind-blowing moment for me, was a really in-depth conversation about the experience, the collective experience they had. And this was one training day, but they did several on multiple locations. In the end, they trained almost 1,500 people this way. So that was my first encounter where I saw, okay, so this is powerful. This can actually change how classroom training is conducted and the way the engagement and basically bringing situations into the classroom. So what is lacking today in classrooms are, in my opinion, those scenarios, those real life scenarios, bringing the outside world into the classroom, bringing the world which you're talking about kind of in a theoretical way in that classroom setting with the trainer, with the instructor, with your peers, but now bringing it into the classroom and making that a shared experience. Another example is, and I will skip this one, is what we saw at Tata Steel. So they are using VR experiences for very technical training to actually show them, for example, a big steel oven with all the do's and the don'ts. So very procedural and how kind of an operating manual almost, but then in a very guided and story-based manner where, as you can see, students really interact with the instructor, with the situation. But also they're using it for safety training, where it is, and this one they're using is hands off the loads, but hands off the load, but also for scenarios like dropped objects, right? So it's and those safety situations are again important to bring them into the classroom, but also in a safe manner, like a simulation. So let me just show you briefly how such a more safety scenario can look like. All right, let me stop that one. So again, to give you a feel for what the experience looks like. Now, let's go into more maybe the how. So to get immersive scenarios into the classroom, you basically need two things, right? As you see, you need the content, the scenario, the experience, and you need the hardware to actually provide it to your students. So let's start with the first one. So the scenario. So the creation of a scenario takes work. You have to put in the effort. It's new, maybe, but it's not necessarily difficult. It's a new type of skill, but we see a lot of people being maybe a little bit afraid of creation. But when they actually are in the process of creating, they're very well. Basically, they open up and they really engage with the creation process. Um, because in the end, we're all storytellers, and we just have to kind of sparkle that storytelling, and then a lot of it happens as as you go, as you are creating that interactive story. Um, and let me share with you a brief anecdote, basically, of one of our of a manager um, uh, in of a training department who saw an opportunity to introduce virtual reality into his classroom or into his learning context. And basically, due to COVID, he could accelerate, right? Because there were a lot of challenges bringing people in. It was very difficult. And then he said, okay, maybe we can actually bring situations into the classroom. But an important challenge he had was his team, because they were, let's say, a little bit old school, right? So maybe a bit afraid of what was to come, the creation, bringing all this new tech, and it was not necessarily welcomed with, well, let's say, very open arms. Um, but what we saw happening and what he saw happening is that when they actually were participating in the creation workshop and the filming workshop, they really opened up, and they conquered their fears. And now, and as you also can see in this picture, they are actually unstoppable, right? So they are creating, they're making scenarios, they're thinking of new ideas, and more ideas are coming also from other parts of the organization. And it really opened up a new skill for them. So not only are they upskilling their trainees, but they're also upskilling their learning and development department in this case. Um, so now let's go into the hardware. So the management of hardware is something, of course, what you have to get used to, right? It was like when the tablet or the iPad or whatever was introduced into corporates or into your organization, right? So then it was also new for IT department, but also for the people using it, how to connect it to the cloud. It was not available. There was a lot of difficulty around that. But now it's very now it's as easy as it gets, also for, in relation, for example, to a desktop or a laptop. So it's now in that range, and the same will happen for VR hardware, and it's already happening, right? So I'm bringing back also, for example, the elderly care facility, because that was in 2019, and these trainers, and I would say 99% of them were women who had already a career in the operation, so doing the work, and now were training their fellow employees. They all needed to manage this hardware. And I'm showing this picture because it looks complicated. Back then, it was, well, also a challenge, and you had to pay attention, and you had to put the work in. But it's also improved, and more cases are out there, which make it very easy to control the hardware from kind of the outside. So power connection with the remote controls, if they are, but also the software to to use on the headset, of course, have made great leaps in usability and how you can use it. In the end, what you see is that the hardware market is dynamic, right? So as you might have read, Apple might be coming out with a VR headset, so they're also coming into the game. So it is you have to make a decision, and sometimes it's difficult or a challenge to make the decision because is it the right moment to start? But you can always start small, and that's what we see also around us, where starting small, experiment is the best way forward. And of course, make sure that the tools you're using are multi-platform, that they are suitable for multiple devices, so you don't have a hardware vendor lock-in that sense. Maybe something on the trainers a little bit more and classroom instructors, because a lot of them are kind of cut out from a different kind of wood and not necessarily the most flexible kind, right? So, and that's a challenge everywhere I look, and that's a challenge we see often. But we also see ways where organizations find a way to find those champions who are willing to do the work, who again, back to this picture, to find those trainers who are willing to invest a bit of time to get to know how it works. It's not difficult. You just have to put in some time and have some interest in actually executing on it. But find those champions is a key part. And this also brings me to a burning question I have for our special guest. Because I'm very curious how he is solving that challenge of putting this new technology in the hands of trainers who, well, let's say, are, broadly speaking, traditional. So let me start to introduce our first guest, special guest, Kees van Meeuwen. I'm gonna add you, Kees, so at least you can come in. Here we go. Yes, I'm gonna invite you on screen. And while hopefully you will join, yes, here we go. Kees, welcome. We
I see a question
can't
of
hear you. Yeah,
Marnix,
now I think we
Guido.
can hear you. Yeah, very good. Kees, you are one of the owners of Own It, a VR training agency, and you have a very rich history also when it comes to sales training and leadership training, whereas you first kind of flew around the world to provide and do the training yourself, but are now very vested in using VR in those, let's say, classroom settings. And in our pre-discussion, you said something. You kind of posed an interesting, well, let's say, sentence, and that was you want to take VR out of the classroom, right? So I started this webinar with bringing VR into the classroom, but I'm very curious about what do you mean by that?
Yes. Well, thank you for the wonderful introduction. I've never been a special guest anywhere, so it feels very nice and
Very good.
welcoming. Yes. What I mean with that, basically, our vision on training is that I have a son. He's 14 years old. He has a lot more knowledge than I do. And why is that? Because whenever he's a curious guy. Whenever he's got a question, he takes his telephone, looks at YouTube or internet, and he just finds out. So whenever he has a need for learning, his need is fulfilled. And what we want to establish is basically help people with instant learning. And we are talking now about soft skill learning. My son, he is interested much more in knowledge, and I don't think there's anything yet for soft skill interpersonal skill training. So we're talking about behavior. But our
Yeah.
vision is that people, if they want to learn behavior, if they have a tough conversation, need to give somebody feedback, are going on a sales call, that instead of waiting for the classroom training, that they take their glasses and they experiment and they prepare with our VR modules. So that's
Okay.
our goal, and we believe that this will happen.
Okay. Very good. So can you maybe share with me and the audience that kind of how does a program look like, right? So what is the build up? What are the elements you're using? What is the process
Yeah, yeah.
trainees go through?
Well, because we are now, in the beginning stage of using VR to train. So what we do now is most of the time we use it as a blended learning concept. So what we have is we have VR modules, and a VR module is a role play. So let's take feedback, for example. You're put in a
Yeah.
role play where you have to give your colleague tough feedback. Another part is the lecture, where the framework is explained that is used in the role play.
Yeah.
Those are both on VR or on your telephone, and then we share a handout with the framework used as a reminder. So that's one part.
And yeah. Yeah.
And the other part is what we find very valuable is the reflection session afterwards. So we plan with small groups of 5 persons. We have live reflection sessions. And there
Yeah.
we take the skill into their own context. And like you mentioned before, they have all experienced the same role play. So therefore, and it's funny, I did not expect it, but you go much faster, deep. You have a much deeper and more personal discussion, which surprised me, but pleasantly surprised me.
Very good. So and that brings me to another question I had. So you, I think, embarked on this, let's say, journey about maybe maybe 2.5 years ago,
Yes.
something like that. So I'm curious, what were your kind of assumptions back then or at the beginning, and what have you learned along the way, and what consequently, how do you look at things now differently then?
Good question. Um, yes, a couple of things. Basically, I've if you look at my blind spots as a facilitator, let's start with that. Is that I became aware that there's a learning zone and a performing zone if you want to learn. For
Hmm.
example, I play golf, or let's take tennis as an example. I'm a lousy tennis player, but if I want to practice to learn a backhand topspin, which I'm not capable of right now, then so I have to learn a new technique, and that means a couple of things. It means that when practicing this technique, it's not about the result. So many balls will not be in the court. It will be over the fence, but that's okay because you are practicing a new technique. You have to
Yeah.
experiment. And
Yeah.
in classroom training, because of social risk, there's basically no room for experimenting. So everybody's in the performance zone, and the performance zone is the zone where you are in the match, and then the result counts. But in order to learn, you need to have the performance zone and the learning zone. And the virtual reality is all about the learning zone, and therefore people learn faster. And that was one of my blind spots
Okay. Yeah.
that I had. Another
Interesting.
thing is, I don't know if there's anybody of human resource out there. I don't want to insult anybody, but this is innovation.
Yeah.
So, innovation is everything. It's everything about experimenting. So, what I found out that although people embrace innovation, if it's really up to them, let's do it. you have to dare to take a risk. And what I found out is that there's many people who love to do this, love to experiment, and are ready for innovation, and some are not, but there's many who are. So
Yeah.
that's needed too. You need an innovative or innovative, I don't know how to pronounce it, mindset if you want to do
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. And how, what would your advice then be? So when I just before introducing you, I talked a little bit about those trainers, and let's say you want to deploy this at scale. So you're gonna ask a lot of trainers to actually use VR in a classroom. So and they potentially are quite reluctant to actually use it. So what would your advice be? How would you approach that?
Yeah, I look for not reluctant trainers now. The what we VR can be used very well as a blended learning tool. So
Yeah.
we are we have different customers. So we have direct customers where we provide everything, and then we have training agencies, and training agencies are looking for differentiation. They want to be, I mean, people are doing it for a long time, the same thing. They want to stand out, they want to differ from competition, and VR is great for them. So if we have these entrepreneurial mindsets that want to use VR as a blended tool and to differ, I don't know if that's correct, but to to make a difference, competitive difference compared to their competitors, then
Yeah.
if they have that mindset, then they will embrace.
Yeah.
And I see that Marnix has a question. Uh, Maybe I can answer it. Is that okay, Guido?
Yeah, for sure. Go for it.
So, Marnix, what is your role? Maybe you can quickly type it in if you're being a trainer or a HR or I don't know.
But maybe to
Yes, it's very
build on
quiet,
that.
Guido, but Marnix already left.
I'm not sure. No, but what? I think his question is all about. Okay, so also in the pictures we saw people with headsets on, right? So also with your trainees, they are in that experience. So is there a way for trainers to well maybe participate or to also see
Yeah,
what's happening, or how do you
yeah,
deal with maybe um, well, maybe coaching or
yeah.
feedback
Yeah, very
during.
good question. Very good question. There's different training scenarios. If we look at the scenarios that you showed, Guido, those are
Mm,
about processes. This
yeah,
is about certification. So you have to go the right path. And you can, your software allows trainers to look at the path they have done.
yeah,
So you can say you
yeah,
did it right. You can, you passed or you did not pass.
yeah,
If we are talking about soft skills, interpersonal skills, we do not believe there's only one right path.
no,
Basically, what we want people to do is to experiment. Look at the path that you would like to take and also experiment on different paths. So we want to motivate them to use it several times.
yeah,
And we don't I am not interested in which path he took as long as he experimented and learned from it. So that's as a trainer, I never look what somebody did. What I
okay,
do look at how long did he do it and how many attempts did he. That's for
okay,
us important.
okay. And do you also discuss with trainees because they are in the same experience, so they well at same as in it's still interactive, so they can make different choices, but it's also on maybe key moments in that scenario where they might take a different route slash make a different decision. Do you talk about those kind of key moments in those peer-to-peer reviews?
Um, what we do is nice, Rachel. Let's take an example. It's not so specific about the scenario itself. Let's take an example for masterful listening. You are a
Yeah.
manager in that scenario, and you have a woman complaining that she needs more people because she's on a project. And it's about masterful listening, and the problem is not the people. The problem is basically her being too much of a perfectionist. So how do we get there? That's by asking the
Mm.
right questions and listening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's about that, and it's much more on a broader level than the scenario itself. We do not often refer to the scenario, but of the learnings. So what do we talk about? Is that we, for example, this morning we talked about the fact somebody said, I'm too much focused on myself. So therefore, my listening skills. I'm in a startup. We're in a rush. We have KPIs are very challenging. So I'm much too much focused on myself. I need to
Mm.
be more focused on the other person. So this is the level of discussion we have.
Yeah.
Or another example this morning was um, I listen, but I don't dig deeper, and I go far too soon to the solution. So I come up with a solution, and the solution is wrong because I'm not listening enough. I'm not asking too much questions.
Yeah.
We are
Yeah.
having discussions on this level, not on
Right.
scenario level. What
No.
happened in this scene?
Okay. Okay. And building on that, because I happen to know that you also use kind of those more evaluations, right? So insights on before, so you fill in something before, then you do the VR experience, and then you
Yes.
also do it after, right? So is that, and I'm guessing that's also an important instrument in that reflecting and getting to such insights.
Yeah. That will by filling in the self-assessment.
Yeah,
That's actually the start of the first reflection because you have to assess yourself on questions you might not have thought before. So that could give an insight,
yeah,
and then you have an assessment afterwards. And for us, we basically we don't care that much if somebody made huge improvements or
mm,
it can be an improvement, but he can also what I like. Sometimes we see that people the self-assessment on the before the training they scored themselves higher than afterwards because they have some new insights. So
exactly. Yeah,
that is
that's
what it's
interesting.
about.
That's progress, right? That's progress.
Exactly. So
Yeah. Uh,
for us, most important is experience, experiment, make mistakes, and learn from it. And
okay.
and VR provides a safe environment, and that's what
Now,
I mean.
because you mentioned that kind of what did you call it? I think social pressure or social
Social
so
risk.
so social risk. So maybe for those who don't have the full concept, what is social risk in your opinion?
Social risk is when you're in a classroom, and I've been many times facilitating a group in a classroom and asking to do a role play in front of the group, or even in threesomes, and they do a role play and they only focus on do not want to make any mistakes in front of my peers or in front of
Yeah,
my other students. So you're in a
yeah,
performance mode. There's
yeah.
never, in a role play, you're never going to do something completely different, and
No,
that
no.
was a blind spot. I didn't,
Yeah.
I tried to make it as safe as possible the environment, but at the end, most people are in the performance zone.
Okay. Interesting. Okay,
Uh,
let me
question.
switch. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Very good.
Question of Geert-Jan. How long do people spend in typical VR training scenarios? What's your experience? We have bigger, we have smaller. Smaller ones are 10-minute scenario, 5 minutes lecture where the framework is explained. Larger scenarios, 20 minutes role play, 10 minutes lecture.
Okay. Thank you. Hopefully, Gert-Jan, this answers your. Very good. So maybe I want to switch also, or at least also talk about hardware, right? Because we also touched upon that. So
Yes.
yes, scenarios, yes, the experience, yes, putting people in those shared experiences slash
Mhm.
lectures, depending on where you are in the process, but also hardware. So maybe share. I mean, I took a photo from you guys' website, so because this is of course really an in classroom, so I was happy to find something that was actually in a classroom. It
This
was
was
an
a
in,
kickoff. Guido, that was the kickoff.
Oh, it was yeah. So that's the kickoff. Yeah, very good. So maybe hardware-wise, what is your experience there? Do people find it yeah a big mountain to climb? Is it
Yeah.
relatively easy? How and maybe is there a difference in well maybe different kind of groups which react differently to the hardware?
Yeah. Hardware is and it's a good point. It's the biggest objection.
Okay.
So what about the glasses? What about the
Yeah.
glasses? So that's the biggest. Yeah. So
What
I
about
ended
it?
up, so that's um, and it's okay. So we had to come up with a solution. And basically, what we are doing, and we are on a journey. So
Okay.
we have quite some, we have bought quite some glasses, and we basically rent them out for 3 months. And so that's a possibility.
Okay.
What another client, they just bought 10 VR glasses themselves, which we really encouraged. So they did it themselves, and we said, okay, in case that you will stop using them after 6 months, we will
Mm.
buy them back for you for a certain
Okay.
amount.
Yeah, that's smart.
So
So
the
risk in a way, reducing the
yeah,
risk, the perceived risk
so
of
customers,
having the
they can,
hardware.
yeah, the clients
Yeah.
can choose, they rent ours or they buy them themselves, and if they're not continuing, we buy them back. So this
Yeah.
is the way we do it now. And
Yeah.
but another nice experiment we're starting in September is, it's for a small company, and we have created a learning room.
Yeah.
So it's a room with an easy chair and two virtual reality glasses, which are uploaded and ready to use. So
Right.
people can learn whenever they want. And
Yeah.
we really think this is the right direction in the future.
Yeah. And okay. And then maybe what have you heard from trainees or participants in using the glasses? Is it difficult? Do they struggle? Do they call their kids to actually get the thing up and running?
Yeah.
What is kind of the general gist of actually using?
What we see is the picture you showed is the picture of the kickoff. So we always have
Yeah,
a kickoff. So either
yeah,
the classes are being sent to the participants, or we
hmm
have a kickoff where we there, and there we practice with the people. We explain the classes, etc. So they have the first experience. So we find it
okay,
important. Next to that, we have manuals with videos. So we try to support them as good as possible. And
yeah,
yes, still, if I'm not a very technical guy, so we do get questions, and then we help them. And this is
yeah,
just, this is an investment from our side to to help them to use the glasses in the right way.
yeah. And then is there because once they used it, it's probably easier to do it the next time. Is that also something you hear back from participants where they, basically after the first time they kind of got used to it and they're basically good to go in
Yeah,
using it and focusing therefore more on the content instead of that piece of hardware.
yeah, that's true. And it is not so difficult if you put on the glasses. We have pre-installed the scenarios, so it's not very, very, very difficult.
No, no, even for a non-technical guy,
I
right?
managed to do it. Yes. I'm looking at some questions,
Yeah,
Guido.
let's
So how?
so first one, hardware.
Yeah.
Antonio, the hardware market is moving fast. What is the right time to enter and buy headset? Yeah, maybe I can answer, right? So, yes, the market is moving fast. Yes, Apple is probably getting into the game. So there's a lot of there's a lot happening. So then the question is, yeah, do you step in or do you keep waiting for whenever that that pace is finished? Well, I would say that that pace will continue and maybe even grow. So, and also that's also what we see with clients. In the end, you have to make a decision, right? So you can make a mix. You can go for the various headsets, so various manufacturers. It also depends for what applications are you going to use it. Is it for multiple, also 3D applications, for example, because then you also need different requirements. Um, so I guess any time is the right time, right? There's no time like the present. And for me, the most important thing is that do it, right? Buy 10 headsets, buy a couple, start experimenting, start using them, and then you'll get a better feel for what your actually need is, and then you can have a better feel for what you actually want to buy should you want to increase that number.
And
But maybe,
so,
yeah, yeah,
also, what people might not be aware of, an average training day, if you have a facilitator, let's say it's about 2,500 euros. So if you buy ten headsets, it's 3,500 euros, which is, personally a big number. For most companies, not a huge number. So the risk
yeah,
is yeah, it is not for free, but it's not a huge investment either.
no, no, especially when you start using it and start kind of getting those results of
Exactly.
even reduced training time, etc. So
Yes.
maybe and I know you have a strong opinion about it, so I will ask you first. So in relation to that, of course, we don't only have VR headsets, but we also have the universal ones slash the cardboard. How do you look at the VR in a cardboard
Me,
via your own mobile phone? Yes,
I do not recommend it. These, I
I
mean,
knew it.
these scenarios are so immersive, and the quality, if you use a proper headset,
Yeah,
the experience is so much better.
yeah,
And people will be, I mean, if you look at our scenarios, 20 minutes in a role play, it's easy with a proper headset. If you have these cartons, uh, people will quit. Will quit. It's much more effort for them to do this in 20 minutes. The
yeah.
experience is not as good as it is. So we
No,
invest we invest big time in having our customers use the VR glasses, because
yeah,
we think that enriches. Then you have the real experience.
yeah,
That's just my opinion.
yeah, yeah. No, I think
By the way,
adding to that,
what we
yeah,
do is the lectures where we explain the theoretical framework. That we say you can easily use your telephone. Just watch it on your telephone. You don't need the carton. Just watch it on your telephone.
yeah.
Uh, that
So
is
more the 2D option, right?
yeah,
So that's
yeah,
in a way, yeah. I um, maybe to add to that is I think it's also depends on um, what what is your goal, right? So do you if you want to use VR in a classroom, go for a headset, right? Because a classroom is how big, like 12, 15, whatever the number is, and then the investment is relatively small in a way, especially if you continue using them. Um, but there could also be a use case where you say, okay, but I also want to send scenarios before they come into the classroom, or my my employees, my workforce is so distributed. I also need another way for them to actually use it. So I won't be able to send headsets across the world. At least not, or maybe at least not at this point in time. Maybe down the road, but not now. But I do want to provide them with an immersive experience, so then you can actually use that. So it's also a question of scale and how fast do you want to train people, right? So there's all these variables, quality, setting, geography, which you have to take into account whether cardboard is a potential way to go.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Then Paul. Paul has a
Yeah,
question. What skills does it require to design a classroom session, including VR?
yeah,
Um,
yeah. So for me, Paul, let's let what I see happening is that in the end, VR enables teachers, trainers to get situations into the classroom. So that's a very basic kind of, well, design principle almost. And that's what you, as a designer of such a program, can use, right? So, as I explained in 2019, the program was for the elderly care people was in the morning theory with a little practice on the iPad, and then starting after lunch with the VR, and then peer-to-peer session to discuss. So that can be a design. Do you need special skills for that? I don't think so. If you design programs as a professional, I think you just need a bit of, well, creativity and willingness and an innovating mindset in order to get that into a classroom, right? So um, uh, then you you don't require special skills. You just need to use your imagination of, okay, how can I use this, and what is the benefit, and how can it benefit the trainee and the employee who is in the classroom best, and then connecting it back to my, let's say, opening statement, in order for them to walk out of the classroom at the end of the day or morning or whatever it is, feeling more confident and better trained, better geared up for the possible situations. If that's in your case a soft skill, masterful listening situation you might encounter tomorrow, or a safety situation. In the end, that's where the design should be geared towards. Alrighty. Um, we are closing in to the hour. Case, any final thoughts before I let you go? And
yeah.
before I
Yeah, I
thank
do
you.
have. Yeah, I have final thoughts. I'm always very
Yeah?
happy to see people who are interested in virtual reality. Uh, I strongly believe in it. I think this is the future for learning. Um, guys, if your listeners or watchers, if you have any questions, if I can help you, let me know, and I'm very much willing to help you get started with virtual reality. It's a very nice journey, and enjoy it all. And thank you, Guido, also for giving me this platform and introducing me as a special guest.
Very good. Happy to do it, Kate. Was great having you on board. Pleasure. And then let me see how. So, bye for now. Talk to you soon. Okay, so let me close his video. And maybe final remarks, because as we said, we're closing in to the hour. Here we go. Um, just some final thoughts from my side, right? So we discussed, and hopefully you learned a bit about how organizations, how people are using VR in a classroom, how relatively easy it can be, how beneficial it is for the trainees, in a self-reflecting way, but also in a peer-to-peer setting, discussing those situations. And of course, from our side, Warp VR, we are here to help you. We are proud to have had you on this webinar. And we are all about making those immersive learning scenarios as easily available to you as possible. And that is all about playing. So we discussed the hardware, we discussed how trainees can interact with it. We have a lot of tools also already there, but also in the pipeline to better equip trainers to use VR in the classroom. An important part, of course, the creation. So the scenario creation with our flow tool, you can easily create and collaborate on that creation to create your own scenarios. Because in the end, we really also want to put those tools in the hands of you as a creator, of you and your employees as being creators. And of course, the ability to manage it, to manage access, to manage the scenarios in the classroom, but also connect it to your LMS or LXP to really make it part of people's learning journey, right? And last but not least is also the buy off the shelf content. Case and his soft skill scenarios are part of that part of the platform. Um, and by all means, if you have any questions, we're happy to help and to share what we've experienced also along the way, also with customers. And hope to connect, hope to interact soon. And for now, thank you again for watching and spending the time with us. Have a great evening, have a great day, and hope to see you soon. Bye bye.